Her hands were bleeding. Ellie McBride didn't stop. She dragged the iron anvil through 3 feet of snow, her 3 children crying behind her, the eviction notice still nailed to her door. A man on horseback watched from the road. He didn't move. She didn't ask. That was the day Samuel Hollister decided he would save her, whether she wanted it or not. But Ellie McBride had buried one husband already. She wasn't about to let another man think she needed saving. If you want to see how this stubborn widow finally broke, subscribe now, follow this story to the end, and drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. Let me see how far this tale has traveled. This is their story. Copper Creek, Texas. December 1879. The eviction notice had been nailed to her door at dawn. Ellie McBride stood in front of it, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. Her fingers already cracked from the cold pressed flat against the paper. "Mama!" She didn't turn. Her eldest, Thomas Jr., stood behind her, 10 years old, already too serious for his age. "Take your brother and sister inside," she said. "But Mama!" "Now, Thomas." He didn't argue. He knew that voice. It was the voice she used when their father died. The voice she used when the fever took half the town. The voice that meant something terrible was coming, and she was getting ready to fight it. Ellie read the notice again. By order of Cornelius Wade, First Bank of Copper Creek. Property to be seized for non-payment of debt. Vacate within 14 days. 14 days. She had 3 children, a forge she could barely operate. And 14 days before they threw her into the street like garbage. Her husband Daniel had been dead for 18 months. The fever had taken him fast 3 days, from healthy to buried. He'd left her the blacksmith shop, a pile of unpaid debts, and 3 children who still woke up crying for their daddy. The town had given her 6 months of sympathy. Then the whispers started. A woman running a forge, unnatural. She ought to remarry. For the children's sake. Cornelius Wade offered. Good man. She refused. Pride, that's what it is. Ellie crumpled the notice in her fist. Pride. They called it pride. She called it survival. Inside the small house attached to the forge, her children sat around the cold stove. Thomas Jr. had his arm around 6-year-old Mary, who clutched a rag doll their father had bought her. William, the youngest at 4, sat on the floor, pushing a wooden horse back and forth. The horse was the last thing Daniel ever made. Mama. Mary said, her voice small. Is the bad man going to take our house? Ellie knelt in front of her daughter. She took Mary's face in her hands, hands that were rough, calloused, nothing like the soft hands she'd had when Daniel was alive. No one is taking our house, she said. Promise. Ellie hesitated. She had never lied to her children. Daniel always said that was her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. I promise, she said. The words tasted like ash. That afternoon, Ellie walked to the bank. The streets of Copper Creek were nearly empty. The cold had driven most folks indoors, and those who remained hurried past without meeting her eyes. She was used to it. A widow with calluses and forge burns didn't fit their picture of respectable womanhood. She pushed open the bank door. Cornelius Wade sat behind his desk, papers spread before him, a gold watch chain glinting at his vest. He was 50 years old, with silver hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Mrs. McBride. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit. She remained standing. I got your notice, she said. Ah. He folded his hands. Yes. Unfortunate business. Your husband, God rest him, left considerable debt. I've been patient, as you know. More than patient. I've been making payments. Partial payments, he corrected. And even those have become irregular. Ellie's jaw tightened. The drought killed half my customers' cattle. Hard to shoe horses when ranchers can't afford to feed them. I understand. Truly I do. Wade leaned forward. which is why I'm prepared to offer you a solution." She knew what was coming. She'd known since the day Daniel was buried, and Wade had shown up at her door with a casserole and a proposal. "No," she said. Wade raised an eyebrow. "I haven't said anything yet." "You're going to offer marriage. Again. And I'm going to refuse. Again." For a moment something flickered in Wade's eyes. Something cold, but his smile didn't waver. "You're a proud woman, Mrs. McBride. I've always admired that. But pride won't keep your children warm. Pride won't put food on your table." He leaned back. "I'm a reasonable man. Marry me and your debts disappear. Your children will have everything they need, a proper home, education, security." Ellie stepped closer to his desk. Her voice was low, controlled. "My husband is buried in the ground, 18 months, and you think I should forget him? Climb into your bed. Let you play father to his children." Wade's smile finally faltered. "I think," he said slowly, "that you should consider your options carefully. Because right now, Mrs. McBride, you don't have many." "I have 14 days. "You have nothing." His voice hardened. "No money, no prospects, no husband. Just stubbornness and 3 mouths to feed." He stood buttoning his jacket. "I'm offering you a lifeline. I suggest you take it." Ellie turned and walked toward the door. "Mrs. McBride." She stopped, hand on the handle. "In 14 days," Wade said, "you will be standing in the street with nothing. Remember this moment. Remember that I tried to help." She didn't look back. "Go to hell, Mr. Wade." The door slammed behind her. The forge was cold when she returned. She'd let the fire die that morning. No coal left, no money to buy more. The anvil sat in the center of the workspace, massive and immovable, a monument to everything Daniel had built and everything she was losing. Thomas Jr. appeared in the doorway. "Mama, a man came while you were gone." Ellie's blood went cold. "What man?" "I don't know. He left something by the back door." She pushed past her son, heart hammering. If Wade had sent someone already, if he'd decided not to wait 14 days. But when she reached the back, she stopped. 3 sacks of coal sat stacked against the wall. Good coal, the expensive kind that burned hot and long. Beside them, a bundle wrapped in burlap. She opened it with trembling fingers. Dried meat, flour, a small jar of honey, and tucked beneath everything a note, just 3 words. For the children. No signature, no name. Thomas Jr. stood beside her. "Who's it from, Mama?" Ellie stared at the note. Her throat felt tight. "I don't know," she whispered. But she had an idea, and she didn't like it one bit. The next morning, Ellie left her children with Ruth Dawson, the only woman in town who still treated her like a human being. "You sure about this?" Ruth asked, bouncing little William on her hip. "Snow's getting worse. I need to know who left those supplies." "Does it matter? Someone's being kind." Ellie pulled on her worn coat, the same one she'd worn when Daniel was alive, now patched in a dozen places. "In my experience," she said, "kindness always has a price. I want to know the cost before I owe it." She followed the tracks. They led away from town, toward the hills where the ranches gave way to wild country. Most folks didn't venture out here unless they had to. The land was rough, the winters brutal, and the men who lived there tended to keep to themselves. Men like Samuel Hollister. Ellie had heard the stories. Everyone had. The former Texas Ranger who'd gone quiet after some tragedy nobody talked about. The hermit who lived in a cabin at the edge of nowhere, who came to town once a month for supplies, and spoke maybe 10 words the entire time. Some said he was crazy. Some said he was dangerous. Some said he'd killed a man with his bare hands. Ellie didn't know what to believe. She only knew one thing: if Samuel Hollister had left those supplies on her doorstep, she was going to find out why. The cabin appeared through the trees about an hour later. It was small, but well built, with smoke curling from the chimney. A horse stood in a makeshift stable nearby, and firewood was stacked higher than Ellie's head, along the side wall. She approached slowly, her boots crunching through the frozen snow. The door opened before she could knock. Samuel Hollister stood in the frame. He was taller than Daniel had been, with broad shoulders and a weathered face. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and a scar ran from his left ear to his jaw. His eyes were the color of thunderclouds. He said nothing, just looked at her. Ellie held up the note. "Was this you?" He didn't answer. "The coal, the food. Was it you?" Still nothing. Ellie felt her temper rising. "I don't need charity, Mr. Hollister. I don't know what you've heard about me, but I'm not some helpless—" "Your boy coughs at night." The words stopped her cold. Samuel's voice was rough, like he wasn't used to using it. "I was passing your place last week. Heard him through the walls. 3 children, no coal, no food. Winter's coming hard." He paused. "Wasn't charity." Then what was it? He considered the question for a long moment. "When I was a ranger," he said finally, "I saw a lot of folks die. Most of them there was nothing I could do. Already too late." His gray eyes met hers. "Saw you dragging that cart through town last week. Your hands were bleeding. You didn't stop, didn't ask nobody for help." He shrugged. "Figured maybe this time I could do something before it was too late." Ellie stared at him. Nobody had ever explained kindness to her like that, like it wasn't about her weakness, like it was about his need to act. "I can't pay you back," she said. "Didn't ask you to." "I won't owe you anything." "You don't." She wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to throw his kindness back in his face, to prove she didn't need anyone to. "Mama said you should always say thank you when someone helps." Ellie froze. The voice came from behind her. She spun around. Thomas Jr. stood at the edge of the clearing, his younger siblings beside him. Mary was holding William's hand. All 3 of them were bundled in 2 thin coats, their cheeks red from cold. "Thomas." Ellie's voice was sharp. "I told you to stay with Mrs. Dawson. She said you might need help." Thomas looked past her to Samuel. "Are you the man who left us the coal?" Samuel nodded once. Thomas walked forward. He stopped in front of Samuel, barely reaching the man's chest, and stuck out his hand. "Thank you, sir. My little brother was real cold. The coal helped." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, just for a moment. Then he reached down and shook the boy's hand. "You're welcome," he said quietly. Mary stepped forward next. She was clutching her rag doll, but she looked up at Samuel with serious eyes. "Mama says we can't take things from strangers," she announced. "But Thomas says you're not a stranger 'cause you helped us. So which is it?" Samuel glanced at Ellie. She saw something in his eyes, not quite amusement, but close. "Reckon that's up to your mama," he said. All 4 of them looked at her. Ellie felt something crack inside her. Not break, not yet, but shift, like ice on a river at the first hint of spring. "He's not a stranger," she said finally. "Not anymore." Mary nodded, satisfied with this answer. William tugged at Ellie's coat. "Mama, I'm cold." Ellie reached down to pick him up, but before she could, Samuel had already turned back to his cabin. "Come inside," he said. "Got coffee on. Milk for the young ones." Ellie hesitated. Every lesson she'd learned since Daniel's death screamed at her to refuse. Don't trust. Don't depend. Don't let anyone close enough to hurt you. But her children were shivering, and Samuel Hollister was already holding the door open. "Just until they warm up," she said. Samuel nodded. Just until then. The cabin was warm, warmer than her own home had been in weeks. The children clustered around the small stove, while Samuel poured milk into tin cups. His movements were careful, deliberate, like a man unused to having guests, trying hard not to make a wrong move. Thomas Jr. wandered toward a shelf on the wall. A book sat there, worn and well read. "You can read?" he asked, surprised. "Thomas," Ellie said sharply. "Don't be rude." But Samuel just nodded. "Taught myself. Lots of time out here alone. What book is it? Samuel picked it up, handed it to the boy. Poetry. Man named Whitman. You know him? Thomas shook his head. Here. Samuel opened to a page. Read that part there. Thomas squinted at the words. I celebrate myself and sing myself. He looked up. What's it mean? Means a man's got to know his own worth, Samuel said. Nobody else can tell him. Thomas considered this. My pa used to say something like that. Smart man, your pa. He's dead. The words hung in the air. Ellie's heart clenched. Samuel knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. I know, I'm sorry. Mama says we gotta be strong now. For each other. Your mama's right. Samuel glanced at Ellie, then back to Thomas. But being strong don't mean being alone. Remember that. They stayed longer than Ellie intended. The children fell asleep by the fire first, William, then Mary, and finally Thomas Jr., who fought it until the very end. Ellie sat across from Samuel, a cup of cold coffee in her hands. Why did you leave the Rangers? She asked. It was a dangerous question. She knew it the moment she asked. But something about this cabin, this man, this strange afternoon made her feel reckless. Samuel didn't answer for a long time. I killed a boy, he said finally. 14 years old. We were chasing a gang of rustlers. He came out of a doorway. I saw the gun I fired. He paused. Wasn't until after I saw his face. Just a kid. Wrong place, wrong time. Gun wasn't even loaded. Ellie said nothing. His mama was there, Samuel continued. Watched me put a bullet in her son. Screamed so loud I hear it still. Every night. He looked at his hands. After that I couldn't. Couldn't wear the badge. Couldn't pretend I was one of the good ones. It was an accident. Don't matter. He's still dead. She still lost him. He met her eyes. Some things you can't make right. All you can do is try to balance the scales. Help where you can. Save who you can. Ellie understood then. The coal, the food, the kindness. It wasn't about her. Not really. It was about him. About a man trying to outrun a ghost he'd never escape. I lost my husband, she said quietly. Fever took him. I was holding his hand when he went. 3 days from healthy to gone. She looked at her sleeping children. Sometimes I'm so angry I can barely breathe. Angry at God. Angry at Daniel for leaving. Angry at myself for not being able to save him. Ain't nothing you could have done. I know. But it don't stop the anger. They sat in silence. Two people carrying weights too heavy to put down, too personal to share. Finally, Samuel stood. Storm's coming, he said. You should get the young ones home before it hits. Ellie nodded. She woke her children, gently gathered their coats, herded them toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. Mr. Hollister. He looked at her. The coal will last a week, she said. Maybe 2. After that, she trailed off. After that, Samuel said, I'll bring more. I told you, I can't owe you. You won't. I'm not keeping score. He paused. But if you want to do something, there's a fence on my south pasture that needs mending. Come spring, if you're still here, maybe you could help. It was a gift, a way for her to pay him back without charity, a way to preserve her pride. Ellie felt her eyes sting. Come spring, she said. I'll be there. She gathered her children and walked into the snow. Behind her, Samuel Hollister stood in the doorway, watching until they disappeared. He didn't know it yet. Neither did she. But something had started that day. Something that would change both their lives. The question was whether they'd survive long enough to see it through. The week after Ellie visited Samuel's cabin, Cornelius Wade came to the forge. She was working when she heard his boots on the wooden floor. The hammer froze mid-swing in her hand. She didn't turn around. Mrs. McBride. His voice slithered through the cold air like something poisonous. "Bank's closed today," she said. "Whatever business you got, it can wait." "This isn't bank business." Wade stepped closer. She could smell his cologne now, expensive and suffocating. "This is personal." Ellie set down the hammer. Slowly, she turned to face him. Wade stood with his hands clasped behind his back, that thin smile playing at his lips. But his eyes were different today. Colder. Hungrier. "I've been hearing things," he said. "Interesting things. About you and that hermit up in the hills." Ellie's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Wade took another step. "Samuel Hollister. Former Texas Ranger, killer, madman." He tilted his head. "And apparently your new benefactor." "He gave my children coal, that's all?" "Is it?" Wade's smile widened. "Because the way I heard it, you spent quite some time in his cabin, alone, with your children sleeping by his fire." Ellie's hands balled into fists. "You got spies watching me now." "I have friends. Friends who worry about a widow making poor choices." He leaned closer. "Friends who might start talking, loudly, about what kind of woman visits a strange man's cabin in the middle of nowhere." "Get out. Think about it, Ellie." He dropped the misses deliberately. A woman alone, 3 children, no husband, and now she's sneaking off to see the town madman. He shook his head with mock concern. "What would people say? What would the church say? Pastor Meeks is a good man, but even he has limits." Ellie grabbed the hammer again. "I said get out." Wade raised his hands in surrender, but his smile never wavered. 11 days, Mrs. McBride. 11 days until you're on the street. Think about my offer. Think hard." He turned and walked out into the cold. Ellie stood there shaking, not from cold, from rage. Thomas Jr. appeared from behind the back door. His face was pale. "Mama, who was that man?" "Nobody." She forced her voice steady. "Just a man who thinks he owns things he doesn't." "He scared me." Ellie knelt down and pulled her son close. She held him tight, feeling his heart beating against hers. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "Mama's going to fix this. I promise." But even as she said the words, she didn't know if they were true. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed she'd once shared with Daniel, staring at the ceiling. Mary and William slept beside her, their small bodies warm against hers. Thomas Jr. was on the floor, wrapped in every blanket they owned. Wade's words echoed in her mind. What kind of woman visits a strange man's cabin? It didn't matter that nothing had happened. It didn't matter that Samuel had only shown kindness. In a town like Copper Creek, perception was everything. And Wade was the kind of man who could shape perception like clay. If he started talking, if he turned the town against her even more than they already were, she might lose everything. Not just the house, not just the forge, her children. A widow with a ruined reputation. 3 small children. No money, no prospects, no family nearby. The state could take them, put them in an orphanage, split them up. The thought hit her like a physical blow. She sat up in bed, gasping. No. No, she wouldn't let that happen. She would die first. She would burn this whole town to the ground first. But what could she do? She was one woman against Cornelius Wade, against the whole rotten system that said she couldn't survive without a man's name attached to hers. She got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake the children. She walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered street. And that's when she saw him. A figure on horseback, barely visible in the moonlight. Just sitting there watching her house. For a moment, fear gripped her. Wade had sent someone. Someone to... But then the figure moved and she caught the outline of broad shoulders, a familiar hat. Samuel Hollister. He wasn't approaching. Wasn't calling out. Just watching. like a guardian she hadn't asked for. Ellie didn't know whether to feel grateful or furious. She pulled on her coat and stepped outside. The cold hit her like a wall, but she kept walking until she stood at the edge of her property looking up at him. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Saw Wade leave earlier." Samuel's voice was low. "Wanted to make sure he didn't come back." "You've been sitting out here all night. Ain't that cold?" "It's 15 degrees." Samuel shrugged. Ellie wrapped her arms around herself. "People are already talking. If they see you here, let 'em talk. Easy for you to say. You don't have 3 children they could take away." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he dismounted, his boots crunching in the snow. He walked toward her, slowly stopping a few feet away. "What did Wade say to you?" "Nothing." "Ellie." It was the first time he'd used her name. Something about the way he said it, soft, concerned, broke something inside her. "He threatened me," she said, the words spilling out. "Said he'd tell everyone that we were—" She couldn't finish. Samuel's jaw tightened. In the moonlight, his scar stood out like a brand. "And you believed him?" "It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what everyone else believes. In 11 days I lose my home. If Wade ruins my reputation too, I could lose my children." Her voice cracked. "I can't lose my children, Samuel. I can't." She was crying now. She hadn't meant to. Hadn't cried in front of anyone since Daniel's funeral. But once the tears started, she couldn't stop them. Samuel stepped forward. For a moment she thought he might touch her, take her hand, hold her something. Instead, he took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "Go inside," he said quietly. "Get some sleep. I'll figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out. Wade owns the bank. He owns half this town. I said I'll figure it out." There was something in his voice, something hard and certain, something that made her believe him despite everything. She pulled his coat tighter around herself. It smelled like pine and leather, and something else, something warm and human. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to us?" Samuel looked at her for a long moment. His gray eyes were unreadable. "Because somebody should," he said. Then he walked back to his horse, mounted, and rode away into the darkness. Ellie stood there until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she went inside, still wearing his coat, and for the first time in 18 months, she slept without nightmares. The next morning, Samuel Hollister walked into the first bank of Copper Creek. Every head turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Cornelius Wade looked up from his desk, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, something like fear flickered in his eyes. Then his mask slid back into place. "Mr. Hollister." Wade stood buttoning his jacket. "This is unexpected. I don't believe you've ever set foot in my bank before." "I'm here to pay off the McBride debt." The silence was absolute. Wade blinked. "I beg your pardon?" Samuel reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He dropped it on Wade's desk. Coins, spilled out gold coins, more than anyone in Copper Creek had seen in one place for years. "That's the full amount," Samuel said. "Plus interest, plus whatever fees you've been inventing. Take it, sign the papers. We're done." Wade stared at the gold. His face went through several emotions, shock, anger, calculation, before settling on something like amusement. "Well, well." He picked up one of the coins, examined it. "The hermit has a fortune hidden away." "How surprising." "The papers weighed." Of course. Wade sat back down, pulling out a ledger. "I'll just need to verify the amount, draw up the proper documents." He looked up with that thin smile. "You understand this will take time." "I'll wait." "It could take days." "I said I'll wait." Their eyes locked. Neither man moved. Finally, Wade laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You know, Mr. Hollister, I'm curious." He leaned back in his chair. "Why?" Why would a man like you spend his entire savings on a widow he barely knows? Samuel said nothing. Could it be, Wade's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, that the rumors are true, that you and Mrs. McBride have a special arrangement? Samuel moved so fast that Wade didn't see it coming. One moment he was sitting behind his desk. The next, he was pinned against the wall, Samuel's hand around his throat. Listen to me, Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're going to take that gold. You're going to sign those papers. And then you're going to forget Ellie McBride exists. You're going to stop watching her. Stop threatening her. Stop even thinking about her. Because if I hear one more word, one more whisper about her or her children, I will come back here, and I will not be as polite as I'm being now. Wade's face was turning purple. His hands clawed at Samuel's grip. Do you understand? Wade managed a tiny nod. Samuel released him. Wade collapsed against the wall, gasping. The papers, Samuel said. Now! 15 minutes later, Samuel walked out of the bank with a signed document in his hand. The McBride debt was paid in full. But as he mounted his horse, he knew this wasn't over. He'd seen the look in Wade's eyes when he left. Not defeated, not scared, planning. Cornelius Wade wasn't the kind of man who accepted humiliation. He would want revenge, and he would come for it when Samuel least expected it. Samuel rode toward Ellie's forge. He had to warn her, had to tell her what he'd done, had to make sure she understood that she was safe for now. But when he arrived, Ellie was already standing outside, and she was not alone. Pastor John Meeks stood beside her, Bible in hand. Behind him, a small crowd had gathered, townspeople, shopkeepers, women who whispered behind their hands. And at the front of the crowd, dabbing at fake tears with a silk handkerchief, stood Cornelius Wade. Ah, Mr. Hollister, Wade called out. Perfect timing. We were just discussing Mrs. McBride's living situation. Samuel dismounted slowly. His hand drifted toward the knife at his belt. What's going on here? Pastor Meeks stepped forward. He was an older man, white-haired and weathered, with kind eyes that now looked troubled. Mr. Hollister, please. We're not here to cause trouble. We're concerned, that's all. Concerned about what? About the children. Wade's voice dripped with false sympathy. You see, some members of our community have raised questions about Mrs. McBride's ability to provide a proper home, a proper environment. Ellie's face was white. This is my home. These are my children. You have no right. We have every right. Wade cut in. When the moral welfare of children is at stake, the community has a responsibility to act. He turned to the pastor. Tell them what you told me, Reverend. Pastor Meeks looked uncomfortable. I've received complaints about Mrs. McBride's associations, about a single woman receiving visits from a single man, about children being exposed to what? Ellie's voice shook with rage. To kindness, to someone who helped us when no one else would. To impropriety, Wade said smoothly. To scandal. To the kind of behavior that sets a poor example for young minds. Samuel stepped forward. The crowd shifted nervously. The McBride debt is paid, he said. Every cent. She doesn't owe you anything. She doesn't owe this town anything. This isn't about debt. Wade smiled. This is about what's best for the children. You don't care about those children. Don't I? Wade turned to the crowd. I've offered to marry this woman, to give her children a proper home, a proper father. She refused. Again and again she refused. He shook his head sadly. And instead, she chooses to associate with. Well, we all know Mr. Hollister's reputation. Thomas Jr. pushed through the crowd to stand beside his mother. His small face was fierce. Leave my mama alone. Thomas, honey, go inside. No. The boy glared at Wade. My mama works harder than anyone in this town. She feeds us and clothes us and keeps us safe. You're just a mean old man who's mad because she doesn't like you." A few people in the crowd chuckled nervously. Wade's smile tightened. "Out of the mouths of babes," he murmured. "You see how these children have been raised defiant, disrespectful. Is this the kind of upbringing we want in our community?" "That's enough." Samuel's voice cut through the murmuring. "You've had your say. Now leave." "Or what, Mr. Hollister? You'll threaten me again, in front of all these witnesses." Samuel went still. Wade's smile widened. "Oh yes, I have witnesses who saw what you did in my bank. Assault, threats, the behavior of a violent, unstable man." He turned to Pastor Meeks. "Is this the kind of person we want influencing our children? A known killer? A madman?" The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Samuel felt the ground shifting beneath him. Wade had planned this perfectly. Every move, every word calculated to destroy not just Ellie, but Samuel too. And then a small voice spoke up. "Mr. Sam isn't a madman." Everyone turned. Mary McBride stood in the doorway, clutching her rag doll. Her small face was streaked with tears, but her voice was clear and steady. "He gave us food when we were hungry," she said. "He gave us coal when we were cold. He reads poetry, and he makes coffee, and he let us sleep by his fire when we had nowhere else to go." She looked directly at Wade. "He's nicer than you. He's nicer than anyone in this whole stupid town." Silence. Ellie moved toward her daughter, but Mary wasn't finished. "My daddy's in heaven," the girl continued. "He watches us. He sees everything. And I think—" She clutched her doll tighter. "I think he sent Mr. Sam to help us, because that's what daddies do. They find ways to help their families, even from heaven." A woman in the crowd began to cry softly. Pastor Meeks looked at the little girl, then at Wade, then at the ground. Something shifted in his expression. "Mr. Wade," he said slowly, "perhaps we've been hasty." "Hasty?" Wade's voice rose. "A child's fantasy is hardly—" "A child's faith," Pastor Meeks corrected, "and faith, Mr. Wade, is something I take very seriously." He walked toward Ellie and her children. Gently he placed a hand on Mary's head. "Go inside, little one. You've said enough." Mary looked at her mother. Ellie nodded, her eyes glistening. When the children were inside, Pastor Meeks turned to face the crowd. "I've known Daniel McBride since he was a boy," he said. "Watched him grow up, watched him marry, watched him build that forge with his own 2 hands. And when the fever took him, I stood at his grave and made him a promise." He looked at Ellie. "I promised I would watch over his family." "Pastor," Wade began. "I'm not finished." The old man's voice was suddenly iron. "I've failed that promise. We all have. This woman has struggled for 18 months, and instead of helping her, we've watched. We've whispered. We've judged." He shook his head. "That ends today." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch of coins. "For the forge," he said, pressing it into Ellie's hands. "To get you through the winter." One by one, others stepped forward. Ruth Dawson with a basket of bread. The schoolteacher with warm clothes for the children. The widow Henderson with a jar of preserved peaches. Wade watched his support crumble, his face growing darker with each offering. Finally, he forced a smile. "Well, it seems the community has spoken. How heartwarming." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Mrs. McBride. I'm sure we'll speak again soon." He walked away through the crowd, and the crowd parted to let him pass. But as he passed Samuel, he paused. "This isn't over." He whispered so low only Samuel could hear. "You've made an enemy today, Hollister. A patient one." Then he was gone. Ellie stood in her doorway, surrounded by gifts, overwhelmed. Samuel caught her eye across the crowd. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." He touched the brim of his hat. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving her to accept what she'd never allowed herself to accept before. Help! But as Samuel crested the hill outside town, he pulled his horse to a stop. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones, the same instinct that had kept him alive through a decade as a ranger. Wade wasn't finished. That smile, those whispered words, they weren't the words of a man who'd given up. They were the words of a man who'd just changed tactics. Samuel looked back at the town, at the tiny figure still standing in front of the forge. Whatever Wade was planning, it wouldn't be public. It wouldn't be clean. And when it came, Ellie wouldn't see it coming. Samuel made a decision. He wasn't leaving. Not until this was over. Not until Ellie and her children were truly safe. He turned his horse and rode toward the hills. He had preparations to make. 3 days passed without incident. Ellie began to believe the worst was over. The townspeople smiled at her now. Ruth Dawson stopped by every morning with fresh bread. Pastor Meeks had organized a group to help repair the forge's leaky roof. Even Thomas Jr. seemed lighter, laughing again for the first time since his father died. But Samuel knew better. He watched from the hills, sleeping in 2-hour stretches, his rifle never far from his hand. He watched the roads. He watched Wade's comings and goings. He watched the strangers who rode into town and the messages that passed between them. On the 4th night, his patience paid off. 3 men rode into Copper Creek after midnight. They didn't stop at the inn. They didn't announce themselves. They went straight to Cornelius Wade's house and didn't come out until dawn. Samuel recognized one of them, Emmett Cole, a bounty hunter who'd been thrown out of the Rangers for excessive violence. The kind of man who didn't ask questions about the jobs he took as long as the money was good. Samuel's blood went cold. Wade wasn't planning to destroy Ellie through reputation anymore. He was planning something far worse. Samuel rode hard toward the forge. He found Ellie in the back, hammering at a piece of iron. The children were inside, their laughter floating through the thin walls. She looked up when she heard his horse, and something in her expression softened when she saw him. "Samuel, I wasn't expecting... You need to leave." Her smile faded. "What?" "Pack what you can carry. Wake the children. I'm taking you somewhere safe." Ellie set down her hammer. "What are you talking about?" "Wade hired men. Dangerous men. They rode into town last night." Samuel dismounted, moving toward her. "I know what they do, Ellie. I know who they are." "You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." Ellie's jaw tightened. "I'm not running. This is my home. Daniel's home. I won't let Wade chase me out like some frightened animal. This isn't about pride anymore." Samuel grabbed her arm. "Listen to me. Emmett Cole killed a family in El Paso 2 years ago. Made it look like a robbery. No witnesses, no evidence. The man who hired him paid off the sheriff and walked free." The color drained from Ellie's face. "He's going to come for you," Samuel continued. "Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But he's coming. And when he does, I can't protect you and 3 children at the same time. Not here. Not in the open." "Where would we go?" "My cabin. It's defensible. 1 way in, 1 way out. I can hold off an army from there if I have to." Ellie looked towards the house. Through the window, she could see Thomas Jr. helping Mary with her letters. William was asleep in the corner, clutching his wooden horse. "If I run," she said slowly, "Wade wins. He gets everything he wanted. If you stay," Samuel said, "your children might not see tomorrow." The words hung between them like a blade. Ellie closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the fight had gone out of her. "Give me 10 minutes." Samuel nodded. "Make it 5. Ellie woke the children without explanation. Thomas Jr. asked questions, but one look at his mother's face silenced him. He helped Mary put on her coat, while Ellie wrapped William in blankets, the boy barely stirring. They took nothing but the clothes on their backs and the wooden horse William wouldn't release. Samuel lifted Mary onto his horse, then William. Thomas Jr. insisted on walking until they were clear of town, his small hand gripping a kitchen knife he'd taken from the drawer. "You know how to use that?" Samuel asked. "My pa taught me." Samuel looked at the boy 10 years old already carrying a man's burden. He reached down and squeezed Thomas's shoulder. "Stay close to me, no matter what happens." They moved through the darkness, avoiding the main road. Samuel knew every trail, every hiding spot, every defensible position between here and his cabin. He'd mapped them all in his years of solitude, never imagining he'd need them like this. They were halfway up the mountain when the shot rang out. Samuel felt the bullet pass within inches of his head. He threw himself sideways, shielding the children on his horse with his body. "Down!" he shouted. "Everyone down!" Ellie grabbed Thomas Jr. and pulled him behind a fallen log. Samuel handed Mary and William to her, then drew his rifle in one fluid motion. 3 figures emerged from the trees. Emmett Cole in the center, 2 others flanking him. All 3 had their guns trained on Samuel. "Well, well," Cole's voice was like gravel. "The Hermit Ranger, heard you'd gone soft. Let them go, Emmett. This is between you and me." "See, that's where you're wrong." Cole spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Mr. Wade paid good money for this job. All of them," he said. "No witnesses." Behind him, Samuel heard Mary whimper. Ellie's hand clamped over the girl's mouth. "The children, too." Samuel kept his voice steady. "That's low even for you." "Money's money." Cole shrugged. "Though I gotta say, there's a bonus if I bring you back alive. Seems Mr. Wade wants to have a conversation with you before you die." Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger. 3 against 1. In the dark. With 4 civilians behind him. The odds were not in his favor, but he'd faced worse. "You remember El Paso?" Samuel asked. Cole's smile flickered. "What about it?" "The family you killed. Father, mother, 2 little girls." Samuel's voice dropped. "The youngest one looked about the same age as the girl behind me. You remember what you did to her?" Cole's expression hardened. "Shut up. I was tracking you for 3 months after that. Got close a few times, but you always slipped away." Samuel raised his rifle slowly. "Not this time." Cole laughed. "You're outnumbered, old man. You really think—" Samuel fired. The bullet took Cole in the shoulder, spinning him around. Before the other 2 could react, Samuel had dropped one with a shot to the leg and tackled the third to the ground. They rolled in the snow, fists flying. The man was younger, stronger, but Samuel had decades of experience. He drove his elbow into the man's throat, then slammed his head against a rock. The man went limp. Samuel staggered to his feet, breathing hard. His side burned a knife wound he hadn't felt until now. Blood seeped through his shirt. Cole was crawling toward his gun, his wounded shoulder leaving a trail of red in the snow. Samuel kicked the gun away. "It's over, Emmett." Cole looked up at him, teeth bared like a wounded animal. "You think this ends anything? Wade's got more men, more money, more patience." He laughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "He'll never stop. Not until she's dead. Not until you're dead. Not until—" Samuel hit him once hard. Cole's head snapped back and he was still. Ellie emerged from behind the log, the children clutching her coat. "Samuel!" Her voice shook. "Your side—" "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "I said I'm fine." He turned to check on the other 2 men, both unconscious but alive. He'd have to tie them up, figure out what to do with them later. Thomas Jr. stepped forward. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "You saved us." Samuel looked at the boy, at the knife still clutched in his small hand, at the fear and gratitude and something else, something like hope shining in his eyes. "We're not safe yet," Samuel said. "We need to keep moving." They reached the cabin an hour before dawn. Samuel had pushed through the pain, refusing to let Ellie look at his wound until the children were inside and the doors were barricaded. Only then did he allow her to cut away his shirt. The knife had gone deep, but not fatally. Ellie cleaned and stitched the wound with steady hands, though her face was pale. "Where did you learn to do this?" Samuel asked. "Daniel got hurt at the forge sometimes. I learned." She tied off the last stitch. This needs proper medicine. A doctor. No doctors. Wade would know within the hour. Ellie sat back, wiping her hands on a cloth. The children were asleep in the corner, exhausted from fear and the long journey. Thomas Jr. had stayed awake until Samuel promised to wake him if there was trouble, then crashed within minutes. What happens now? Ellie asked. We wait for daylight. Then I go back to town. To do what? Samuel didn't answer. Ellie grabbed his arm. Samuel, to do what? He met her eyes. To end this. You mean to kill him? It wasn't a question. Samuel pulled away. Wade won't stop. You heard Cole. He'll keep sending men until one of them succeeds. The only way to protect you, to protect those children, is to take him out of the picture. And then what? You hang. You rot in prison. Ellie's voice rose. What good does that do anyone? At least you'll be alive. I don't want to be alive if it means... She stopped herself. Her hand covered her mouth. Samuel went very still. If it means what? Ellie shook her head. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Ellie, I can't do this again. Her voice broke. I can't watch another man. She couldn't finish. Couldn't say the word that was choking her. Samuel stood. Slowly, carefully, he closed the distance between them. He reached out and wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. You can't promise that. I can try. She looked up at him. In the flickering firelight, her eyes were the color of spring leaves. Daniel made me promises too, she whispered. He promised he'd be careful, promised he'd come home every night, promised we'd grow old together. Her voice hardened. And then he died, and all those promises turned to dust. Samuel cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, impossibly gentle for a man with so much blood on his conscience. I'm not Daniel, he said. I'm not going to promise you things I can't control. But I can promise you this, as long as I'm breathing, no one hurts you. No one hurts those children. And if I have to burn the whole world down to keep that promise, I will. Ellie closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted. The wall she'd built around herself, the wall that had protected her for 18 months, cracked down the middle. She kissed him. It was brief, fierce, tasting of tears and desperation, and something neither of them had expected to find again. When she pulled back, Samuel didn't move, didn't breathe. That wasn't... Ellie started. I didn't mean... I know what you meant. They stood there inches apart, the fire crackling between them and the silence of the mountains pressing in from all sides. Then Thomas Jr.'s voice broke the moment. Mama? Ellie stepped back quickly, wiping her face. I'm here, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. I heard something outside. Samuel's hand went to his gun. Stay here. He moved to the window and peered through the crack in the shutters. His blood ran cold. A dozen torches flickered in the darkness below. A dozen men on horseback spread out across the approach to his cabin, and at the front of them all, wrapped in his fine coat, sat Cornelius Wade. Wade's voice carried through the night, calm and cheerful. Mr. Hollister, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Samuel turned to Ellie. Take the children. There's a back way out, a tunnel behind the fireplace. Follow it to the creek and don't stop moving. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. Samuel. Ellie. His voice was hard now, the voice of a Texas Ranger giving orders. Those children need you more than they need me. If I can hold them off long enough, you can get a head start. Go to Silver Ridge. There's a sheriff there named Dalton. Tell him what happened. Tell him Emmett Cole confessed to being hired by Wade. Cole didn't confess. He will when Dalton finds him tied up in the woods with a written statement in his pocket. Samuel allowed himself a thin smile. I wrote it while you were stitching me up. His signature might not be perfect, but it'll be enough to start an investigation. Ellie stared at him. You planned this, all of it. I planned for every possibility. He checked his rifle. This was one of them. Outside, Wade called out again. "Last chance, Hollister, send out the woman and children, and I'll let you walk away." Samuel moved to the door. "Go. Now." Ellie grabbed the children, wrapping them in blankets. Thomas Jr. struggled against her. "I want to help. I can fight." "The best way to help is to protect your mother," Samuel said. "Can you do that for me?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Good man." Samuel looked at Ellie one last time. "When this is over, I'll find you. Promise." He smiled a real smile, one that transformed his weathered face. "I don't make promises I can't keep, but I'll try." Then he opened the door and stepped out into the night. Wade's men raised their rifles. Samuel raised his hands. "You want to talk?" he called out. "Let's talk." Wade nudged his horse forward, that thin smile playing at his lips. "I knew you were a reasonable man, Hollister. Where is she?" "Gone." The smile flickered. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, while you were making speeches, she slipped out the back. By now she's halfway to Silver Ridge with enough evidence to hang you 10 times over." Wade's face went pale, then red, then a shade of purple Samuel had never seen on a living person. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Samuel lowered his hand slowly. "Emmett Cole sang like a bird before I knocked him out. Names, dates, every dirty job he's done for you. It's all written down, signed and witnessed, and right now it's heading straight to Sheriff Dalton. Dalton is a fool. Dalton's honest. That's worse for you." Wade's hand trembled on his reins. For the first time since Samuel had known him, the mask of control slipped completely. "Kill him," Wade said quietly. No one moved. "I said kill him." Still no one raised a weapon. One of Wade's men, an older man with a gray beard, spoke up. "Didn't sign on to murder a ranger, Mr. Wade. Paid or not, that's hanging offense. He's not a ranger anymore. Once a ranger, always a ranger." The man spat on the ground. "I'm out." He turned his horse and rode away. 2 others followed. Wade watched his force crumble, his face twisting with impotent rage. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled at Samuel. "I'll hire more men. You'll what?" Samuel stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in Wade's eyes. "Every man in this territory knows what you did tonight. You rode up here with a small army to kill a widow and 3 children. You think anyone's going to work for you after this?" "They'll forget." "Will they?" Samuel smiled grimly. "Because I won't. And I've got a long memory, Wade. A long memory and nothing but time." Wade stared at him. The remaining men shifted uneasily on their horses. Finally, Wade pulled his horse around. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Samuel replied. "It is." Wade rode away. His men followed their torches, disappearing one by one into the darkness. Samuel watched until the last light vanished. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed in the snow. The knife wound had reopened. Blood soaked through his shirt, pooling beneath him. The cold seeped into his bones, and for the first time in years, Samuel Hollister felt something like peace. He'd done it. He'd saved them. Whatever happened next, Ellie and the children were safe. That was enough. That had to be enough. His eyes drifted closed, and somewhere in the distance, he heard someone calling his name. Ellie heard the gunshots and stopped running. Thomas Jr. crashed into her back. Mary screamed. William woke crying, confused and terrified in the darkness. "Mama!" Thomas grabbed her coat. "Mama, we have to keep going. He said, I know what he said." Another shot echoed through the mountains. Then silence. Ellie stood frozen at the mouth of the tunnel, the cold night pressing against her face. Behind her lay safety. Silver Ridge. Sheriff Dalton. Everything Samuel had planned. In front of her, somewhere in that darkness, Samuel was fighting alone. Maybe dying alone. "Take your brother and sister." Ellie's voice didn't sound like her own. "Follow the creek like he said. Don't stop until you reach Silver Ridge." Thomas's eyes went wide. What? No, Mama, you can't. I'm not leaving him. But he told us to run. I don't care what he told us. Ellie knelt down, gripping her son's shoulders. Thomas, listen to me. You're the oldest. You're in charge now. Take care of Mary and William. Find Sheriff Dalton. Tell him everything. Mama, please. I love you. She kissed his forehead, then Mary's, then William's. I love you all so much. Now go. Mama. But she was already running back through the tunnel, back toward the cabin, back toward the man who had given everything for her family. She emerged into chaos. Wade's men were retreating, their torches disappearing into the trees. Wade himself was a distant figure spurring his horse down the mountain. She counted 5, maybe 6 riders. Where there had been a dozen, now there were barely half. And in the snow, motionless, lay Samuel. No! The word tore from her throat. No, no, no! She ran to him, sliding on her knees through the bloody snow. Her hands found his face, his chest searching desperately for signs of life. Samuel, Samuel, wake up. Please wake up. Nothing. She pressed her ear to his chest. Faint, so faint, but there a heartbeat. Irregular stuttering, but present. Thank God. Tears streamed down her face. Stay with me. You hear me. You don't get to die. I forbid it. She looked around wildly. The cabin door hung open. Inside, the fire still burned. If she could get him inside, stop the bleeding, keep him warm. Ellie grabbed Samuel under the arms and pulled. He was heavy. Dead weight, 200 pounds of muscle and bone. Her arms screamed in protest. Her back shrieked. She pulled anyway, inch by inch, through the snow and blood up the steps across the threshold. By the time she got him in front of the fire, she was sobbing. His shirt was soaked through. The wound in his side had torn open completely. She could see things she didn't want to name. Okay. She forced herself to breathe. Okay. I can do this. I've done this before. She found clean cloth, hot water, the needle and thread she'd used hours ago. Her hands shook so badly she could barely thread the needle. Don't you dare die on me, Samuel Hollister. She began to sew. Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness. He saw faces. His brother young and laughing before the fall. The boy in El Paso, eyes wide with terror. Daniel McBride, though they'd never met. Somehow, he knew it was Daniel standing at the edge of a vast darkness watching him. And Ellie. Always Ellie. Her voice reached him through the fog. Stay with me. Don't let go. He wanted to answer, wanted to tell her he wasn't going anywhere. But his body wouldn't obey. The darkness pulled at him warm and seductive. It promised rest, peace, an end to the guilt that had haunted him for years. Then he heard something else. Daddy would have liked you. Thomas Jr.'s voice. Close. Real. He used to tell me about Rangers. Said they were the bravest men in Texas. Said they did what was right even when it was hard. A pause. You're like that, Mr. Sam. You're brave. Samuel felt something warm on his hand. Small fingers gripping tight. Please don't die. Mama needs you. We all need you. The darkness receded. Samuel opened his eyes. Thomas Jr. sat beside him, face streaked with tears, one hand clutching Samuel's like a lifeline. Behind him, Mary and William were curled together by the fire asleep. And Ellie. Ellie sat on his other side, her hands bloody, her face exhausted, her eyes red from crying. When she saw him awake, she let out a sound, half laugh, half sob. You idiot, she whispered. You absolute idiot. Thought I told you to run. His voice came out as a croak. Since when do I listen to you? Samuel tried to smile. It hurt. Everything hurt. The children. Safe. We're all safe. She squeezed his hand. You did it. Wade's gone. His men scattered. He'll come back. No. Ellie's voice was certain. Thomas found Sheriff Dalton, told him everything, Dalton's already riding to Copper Creek with a posse. Wade's finished. Samuel closed his eyes. For the first time in days, the tension in his body began to ease. How did you... He paused, coughing. How did you find Dalton so fast? I didn't. Ellie nodded toward her son. He did. Ran through the night all the way to Silver Ridge. Found the sheriff at dawn. Samuel looked at the boy, 10 years old, bruised, exhausted, but burning with a quiet pride. You did that? Samuel asked. Thomas Jr. nodded. You saved us. I had to save you back. Something shifted in Samuel's chest. Not pain, something else. Something that had been frozen for years, slowly beginning to thaw. Your pa would be proud of you, he said. Thomas's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. He just squeezed Samuel's hand tighter. Get some rest, Mr. Sam. We'll be here when you wake up. Samuel wanted to argue, wanted to keep watch, make sure Wade didn't return, protect them like he'd promised. But his eyes were already closing, and this time the darkness was gentle. 2 days later, Samuel was well enough to sit up. 3 days after that, he could walk. Ellie watched him push himself, stubborn as always, refusing help even when his legs shook and his face went pale. She'd learned not to argue. Samuel Hollister would heal on his own terms, or not at all. On the 5th day, riders appeared on the mountain trail. Samuel reached for his rifle before Ellie touched his arm. It's Dalton. Sheriff Ben Dalton was a big man with a thick mustache and honest eyes. He dismounted slowly, removing his hat as he approached the cabin. Mrs. McBride, Mr. Hollister. He nodded to each of them. Got some news I thought you'd want to hear in person. Wade, Samuel asked. Arrested last night. We found Emmett Cole and his men right where you said all trussed up with that confession in Cole's pocket. Dalton shook his head. Cole's singing like a Sunday choir now. Every dirty deal Wade ever made, every man he hired, every palms he greased. Half the county's under investigation. Ellie's knees went weak. She grabbed the doorframe for support. It's really over. It's really over, ma'am. Dalton's face softened. Wade's going to prison for a long time, maybe forever. You and your children don't have to be afraid anymore. The words didn't feel real. After months of struggle, after nights of terror, and days of desperation just like that, it was done. What about the forge? She asked. The debts. Wade's assets are being seized to repay everyone he swindled. That includes your husband's debts. As far as the law's concerned, you own that forge free and clear. Ellie put a hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Thomas Jr. appeared in the doorway. Mama, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. She pulled him close, laughing through her tears. Nothing's wrong. Everything's finally right. Samuel watched them, something aching in his chest. This was what he'd fought for, what he'd bled for. This moment, Ellie holding her son, the weight of fear finally lifting from her shoulders. It was everything, and it was enough. He started to turn away to give them privacy when Dalton's voice stopped him. Mr. Hollister, one more thing. Samuel turned back. Dalton reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet. Inside was a silver badge, worn and tarnished. Found this in your old personnel file. Governor thought you might want it back. Samuel stared at the badge. Texas Ranger. The words were faded, but still legible. I'm not a ranger anymore. Governor disagrees. Says a man who takes on a small army to protect a widow and 3 children sounds like a ranger to him. Dalton held out the badge. It's yours if you want it. Full reinstatement. Back pay. Clean slate. The silence stretched. Samuel thought about the boy he'd killed. The screaming mother. The years of guilt and isolation. Could a badge really erase all that? I need to think about it, he said finally. Dalton nodded. Take all the time you need. He tucked the badge back into his coat. Just know the offer stands. Texas could use more men like you. He tipped his hat to Ellie, mounted his horse, and rode away down the mountain. That night, after the children were asleep, Ellie found Samuel outside the cabin. He was sitting on a log staring at the stars. His rifle lay beside him, though there was no danger left to guard against. She sat down next to him without asking permission. "You're thinking about leaving?" It wasn't a question. Samuel didn't answer for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "I've been alone a long time, Ellie. I don't know how to be anything else." "That's not true. I've seen you with the children. I've seen how Thomas looks at you like you hung the moon. Thomas deserves better than a broken-down killer for a father figure." Ellie's hand found his in the darkness. "You're not a killer, Samuel. You made a mistake. A terrible, tragic mistake. But that's not who you are. You don't know who I am. I know exactly who you are." Her voice was fierce now. "You're the man who gave us coal when we were freezing, who fixed our stove without asking for thanks, who paid off our debts and faced down an army and nearly died protecting us." She squeezed his hand. "That's who you are. Everything else is just noise." Samuel turned to look at her. In the starlight, her eyes shone. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." A smile tugged at her lips. "But I don't care about deserving. I care about what is. And what is that my children love you. My son worships you. My daughter thinks you're a hero from one of her storybooks. And you—" Ellie's smile faded into something deeper, something true. "I love you, Samuel Hollister. God help me, but I do." The words hung between them like a held breath. Samuel had spent years convinced he would die alone, that he deserved to die alone, that the guilt he carried was a life sentence with no chance of parole. But looking at Ellie now, this fierce, stubborn, beautiful woman who had survived everything the world threw at her, he felt something shift. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about building something new, something worth protecting. "I love you too," he said. The words felt rusty, unused for too long, but they were true. Ellie's face crumpled. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and for a long moment, they just sat there, watching the stars, saying nothing. Finally, Ellie spoke. "So what now?" Samuel thought about the badge in Dalton's pocket, about the forge waiting in Copper Creek, about 3 children asleep inside the cabin, dreaming of a future that finally seemed possible. "I reckon that's up to us," he said. "Us." Ellie tested the word. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." She tilted her face up to his. He kissed her soft and slow, tasting the salt of her tears and the sweetness beneath. When they finally pulled apart, the first light of dawn was breaking over the mountains. "Come inside," Ellie said. "It's cold." Samuel stood wincing at the pull of his stitches. He reached for his rifle out of habit, then stopped. He didn't need it anymore. He followed Ellie into the cabin, closing the door softly behind them. Thomas Jr. was awake, sitting by the dying fire. He looked up as they entered. "Mr. Sam." "Yeah." "Are you staying?" Samuel looked at Ellie. She nodded, eyes bright. He turned back to the boy. "Yeah," he said. "I'm staying." Thomas's face broke into a smile. Not the guarded smile of a child who'd learned not to hope. A real smile, open and trusting and full of joy. "Can you teach me to ride and shoot and track animals like a real ranger? I can teach you all that and more." Samuel sat down beside him. "But first, I need you to teach me something." "Me teach you?" "Your pa. What was he like?" Thomas's smile faltered, then steadied. He was the best, strong and kind, and he always knew what to say." "Tell me about him." So Thomas did. He talked about his father's laugh, deep and warm, about how he used to carry Thomas on his shoulders, about the wooden horse he'd carved for William and the songs he'd sing Mary to sleep with. Samuel listened to every word. Because a man couldn't replace Daniel McBride. He wasn't trying to. But maybe, just maybe, he could honor Daniel's memory by protecting what Daniel had loved most. His family. Their family. By the time Thomas finished talking, the sun had fully risen, casting golden light through the cabin windows. Mary and William were stirring. Ellie was making coffee, and Samuel was still sitting by the fire listening to a boy talk about his hero. It wasn't the life he'd imagined. It was better. Spring came to Copper Creek like a promise finally kept. The snow melted, the roads cleared. And one morning, Ellie McBride walked back into town with her 3 children and Samuel Hollister at her side. Folks stopped and stared. Conversations died mid-sentence. Shopkeepers came to their doorways watching the strange procession make its way down Main Street. Ruth Dawson was the first to break the silence. "Ellie!" She rushed from her store, arms wide open. "Lord in heaven, we thought when we heard about Wade's men, we thought the worst." "We're fine, Ruth." Ellie embraced her friend. "We're all fine." Ruth pulled back, looking at Samuel with new eyes. "And you. The whole town's talking about what you did. Facing down Wade. Protecting Ellie and the children." Her voice caught. "We judged you wrong, Mr. Hollister. I judged you wrong. You had reason to be cautious." Samuel touched the brim of his hat. "No hard feelings." Pastor Meeks appeared next, out of breath from hurrying. He grasped Samuel's hand with both of his. "Mr. Hollister, I owe you an apology. When Wade came to me with his lies, I should have seen through them. Instead, Pastor." Samuel's voice was gentle. "Let it go." "But I nearly—" "You came around in the end. That's what matters." The old man's eyes glistened. He nodded, unable to speak, and stepped back. More people gathered. The schoolteacher, the general store owner, families who'd kept their distance before. One by one, they approached with words of thanks, apology, welcome. Thomas Jr. watched it all with wide eyes. "Mama," he whispered, "why are they being so nice now?" Ellie knelt beside her son. "Because sometimes people need to see the truth before they can believe it." And Mr. Sam showed them the truth. That he's good. That he's good. And that we're worth fighting for. Thomas looked up at Samuel, who stood apart from the crowd, uncomfortable with the attention. "I always knew he was good," Thomas said. "From the first day." Ellie smiled. "I know, sweetheart. You're smarter than all of us." The forge was exactly as they'd left it. Samuel walked through the space, slowly running his hand over the anvil, the tools, the cold hearth. Daniel McBride's lifework preserved despite everything. "I don't know the first thing about blacksmithing," he admitted. Ellie laughed. "Good thing I do. Daniel taught me before." She paused. "Before? You never told me that." "You never asked." She picked up a hammer, tested its weight. "I wasn't as good as him, never will be. But I can shoe a horse, fix a wagon wheel, keep this place running." Samuel watched her, something shifting in his expression. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just, you keep surprising me." "Better get used to it." Mary tugged at Samuel's coat. "Mr. Sam, can I help too?" "You want to be a blacksmith?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "Daddy said girls can do anything boys can do. He said I could be president if I wanted." Samuel knelt down to her level. "Your daddy was right. You can be anything you want. Even a Texas Ranger." He laughed a real laugh, the first she'd ever heard from him. "Even a Texas Ranger, though I reckon you'd give the outlaws something to really be afraid of." Mary beamed. William toddled over, dragging his wooden horse. He held it up to Samuel without a word. "What's this for you?" William said. It was the first words he'd spoken directly to Samuel. "Daddy made it. Now you have it." Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. Samuel looked at the carved horse, worn smooth from years of tiny fingers. One ear chipped, the paint faded. The last thing Daniel McBride had made for his children. "I can't take this, little man. This is special." "You're special too." William's eyes were serious beyond his 4 years. "Thomas says, you're our new daddy now." The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. He looked at Thomas Jr., who stood in the doorway, face red. I didn't, I mean, I just said maybe if things I didn't mean. It's okay. Samuel's voice was rough. He stood slowly, still holding the wooden horse. Thomas, come here. The boy approached hesitantly. Samuel put a hand on his shoulder. I'm not trying to replace your father. Nobody can replace him. He was a good man, and he loved you, and that love doesn't go away just because he's gone. Thomas's chin trembled. I know. But if you want me to stick around, if you want me to be part of this family, I will be. Not as a replacement. As something new. Something different. He looked at each of the children in turn, then at Ellie. If that's okay with everyone. Mary hugged his leg. William raised his arms to be picked up. Thomas Jr. stood very still, fighting tears. My daddy would have liked you, Thomas said finally. He always said the best men are the ones who do hard things because they're right. You did hard things, Mr. Sam. The hardest. Call me Sam. His voice cracked. Just Sam. Thomas nodded. Then slowly he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Samuel's waist. Ellie watched her children embrace the man who'd saved their lives. The man who'd given everything he had. The man she loved. She joined them, and for a moment, the five of them stood together in Daniel's forge, holding on to each other, like survivors of a shipwreck who'd finally found shore. 3 months later, the town gathered at the small white church. Pastor Meeks stood at the altar, Bible in hand. The pews were packed. Ruth Dawson in the front row, dabbing at her eyes. Sheriff Dalton, near the back arms, crossed a rare smile on his weathered face. Families who'd once whispered behind Ellie's back now sat with heads bowed in prayer. Thomas Jr. stood at the front, straight-backed and serious, holding a small pillow with 2 simple rings. Mary scattered flower petals down the aisle, her face shining with joy. William sat on Ruth's lap, waving the wooden horse at anyone who looked his way. And Ellie. Ellie walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. No family to witness. Just herself, in a dress Ruth had helped her sew her hair down, for once flowers woven through the curls. Samuel waited at the altar. He wore a clean white shirt and his best trousers, and he looked absolutely terrified. Ellie smiled. She'd never loved him more. Pastor Meeks cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Eleanor McBride and Samuel Hollister in holy matrimony. Samuel's hands shook as he reached for Ellie's. She squeezed them, steadying him. I believe the bride and groom have prepared their own vows. Pastor Meeks continued. Samuel. Samuel took a deep breath. Ellie. His voice was low, meant only for her. I spent 10 years running from my past. I told myself I didn't deserve happiness, didn't deserve a family, didn't deserve anything but guilt and loneliness. He paused, steadying himself. Then I saw you. Dragging a cart through the snow, your hands bleeding, your back straight. And you looked at me like I was just another obstacle to overcome. He smiled. Nobody had ever looked at me like that. Like they weren't afraid. Like they saw something worth seeing. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. I'm not a perfect man. I've done things I can't take back. But I promise you this, every day for as long as I live, I will try to be the man you see when you look at me. The man your children think I am. The man Daniel McBride would have trusted with his family. He lifted her hands to his lips. I love you, Eleanor McBride. You and your stubborn pride and your unbreakable will. You showed me that even broken things can be made whole again. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to take a chance on me. The church was silent. Ruth was openly sobbing. Even Sheriff Dalton looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Pastor Meeks turned to Ellie. And you, Eleanor? Ellie released a shaky breath. Samuel. Her voice was stronger than she expected. When Daniel died, I thought my heart died with him. I thought I would never feel anything again except grief and anger and exhaustion. She looked at her children, their faces upturned and hopeful. Then you came, not like a hero from a storybook riding in to save the day. You came quietly, patiently, leaving coal on my doorstep and fixing my stove and never asking for anything in return. She reached up and touched the scar on his cheek. You taught me that strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to let someone stand beside you. You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. It's courage. Her voice broke, but she pushed through. I love you, Samuel Hollister. I love your silence and your stubbornness, and the way you read poetry when you think no one's listening. I love how you look at my children like they hung the stars. I love the man you're becoming even more than the man you already are. She smiled through her tears. Daniel sent you to us. I believe that with my whole heart, and I will honor his memory by loving you as completely as I loved him. Because that's what he would have wanted. For us to be happy. For us to be whole. Pastor Meeks beamed. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Samuel pulled Ellie close. The kiss was soft sweet, and tasted of tears, hers and his both. The church erupted in cheers. Thomas Jr. threw his arms around both of them. Mary jumped up and down, scattering the remaining flower petals. William waved his wooden horse triumphantly, shouting words no one could understand, but everyone celebrated. Ruth Dawson was the first to embrace the newlyweds. About time, she laughed. I've been planning this reception for weeks. Sheriff Dalton shook Samuel's hand. Got something for you. He pressed a leather wallet into Samuel's palm. The badge. Samuel looked at it, then at Dalton. I thought, Governor's waiting on your answer, but I figured married man family responsibilities, you might see things differently now. Samuel stared at the badge, the symbol of everything he'd been, everything he'd run from. Ellie touched his arm. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. He looked at his wife. At his children now in every way that mattered. At the community that had judged him, then accepted him, then celebrated him. No, he said finally. I don't need this anymore. He pressed the badge back into Dalton's hand. I've got everything I need right here. The summer sun blazed over Copper Creek, but inside the forge, the heat was tempered by open windows and the steady rhythm of hammer on iron. Ellie worked the bellows, while Samuel watched, still amazed by her skill. Thomas Jr. swept the floors, pausing occasionally to ask questions about metallurgy that left Samuel reaching for explanations he didn't have. Mary sat in the corner with her primer, reading aloud to William, who clutched his wooden horse and listened with solemn attention. A knock sounded at the door. Samuel tensed. Old habits died hard, but relaxed when he saw the visitor. A young woman, barely 20, stood in the doorway. Her dress was threadbare, her shoes worn through, and a baby was bundled against her chest. Behind her, 2 small children clung to her skirts. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was told someone said there's a family here that helps folks in need. Ellie set down her tools and wiped her hands. Who told you that? A man on the road. Said if I ever got to Copper Creek, I should find the Hollisters. Said they'd know what to do. Samuel and Ellie exchanged glances. What's your name? Ellie asked gently. Martha. Martha Collins. The young woman's voice cracked. My husband passed last winter. Fever. I've been walking for 3 weeks looking for work. Anything. I can sew, clean, cook. Are you hungry? Ellie interrupted. Martha's eyes filled with tears. She nodded too, overcome to speak. Thomas fetched some bread and cold meat from the house. Mary put some water on to boil. Ellie guided Martha to a chair. Sit. Rest. You're safe now. I can't pay. Nobody's asking you to pay. Samuel knelt down to eye level with the 2 children. A boy and a girl, both filthy, both terrified. What are your names? The boy spoke first. I'm James. This is Lucy. How old are you, James? 7, sir? That's a good age. Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 pieces of hard candy he'd started carrying them since becoming a father. You like sweets? James's eyes went wide. He looked at his mother, who nodded tearfully. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. There's more where that came from, but you have to earn it. How? Samuel smiled. By eating everything your mother puts in front of you. Can you do that? James nodded solemnly. Lucy took her candy with both hands, already unwrapping it. Martha watched her tears falling freely now. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. Ellie sat beside her. Because someone did this for me once, when I had nothing, when everyone else looked the other way. She glanced at Samuel. Sometimes all it takes is one person deciding to help, and that changes everything. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to. But someday when you're on your feet again, you find someone else who needs help, and you help them. Ellie squeezed her hand. That's how the debt gets paid. That night, after Martha and her children were settled in the spare room, Ellie stood on the porch with Samuel watching the stars. Do you think we did the right thing? She asked. What do you mean, taking them in? We barely have enough as it is. Samuel pulled her close. We have more than enough. And even if we didn't, he shook his head. I spent too many years watching people suffer because it wasn't my business. Not anymore. Ellie leaned into him. Daniel would be proud of all of this. You think so? I know so. She tilted her face up to his. He's watching, you know. I feel it sometimes. In the forge when the fire's just right. In the children's laughter. In you. In me. In how you love us. In how you protect us. Her voice softened. He chose you, Samuel. I believe that. He sent you to us when we needed you most. Samuel looked up at the stars, countless eternal, each one a light in the darkness. Maybe she was right. Maybe somewhere up there, Daniel McBride was watching, approving, at peace. And maybe that was the real redemption. Not erasing the past, not atoning for sins that could never be fully atoned, but building something new, something good, something that would outlast the pain. Thank you, Samuel said quietly. For what? For giving me a reason to live. After everything I did, after everything I lost, you gave me a reason. Ellie took his face in her hands. You gave yourself a reason, Samuel. I just helped you see it. She kissed him soft and slow, and the night wrapped around them like a blessing. Years passed. The forge prospered. Thomas Jr. grew into a fine young man, apprenticed to a lawyer in Austin, determined to fight injustice through the law. Mary became a teacher, fierce and brilliant, beloved by her students. William took over the forge, his father's wooden horse now carved in iron and mounted above the door. Martha Collins remarried a good man from Silver Ridge and never forgot the family who'd saved her. And Samuel and Ellie. They grew old together. He never took back his ranger badge. He never needed to. He'd found something better than duty. He'd found purpose. In the children he raised. In the community he served. In the woman who'd taught him that love could heal even the deepest wounds. On their 30th anniversary, they sat on the same porch where they'd stood that first starlit night. Samuel's hair was white now. His hands were gnarled from decades of work. But his eyes still carried that steel-gray depth. And when he looked at Ellie, they still softened with something close to wonder. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous habit. He smiled. I've been thinking about that day. The day you refused my water. You remember that? I remember everything. You were so angry, so stubborn, so... He shook his head. Beautiful. Ellie laughed. I was half dead from exhaustion and covered in dirt. Beautiful, he repeated. The most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. She reached for his hand. Bones creaked. Joints protested. Neither of them cared. I'm glad you didn't give up on me, she said. Couldn't if I tried. Even when I threw your kindness back in your face. Especially then. He squeezed her fingers. That's when I knew. Knew what? Samuel turned to face her. In the fading light, the years fell away, and for a moment, they were both young again, a stubborn widow and a broken ranger, finding their way to each other. That you were worth fighting for, he said. That everything I'd been through, every mistake, every regret, every sleepless night led me to you. And that made it all worth it. Ellie's eyes glistened. I love you, Samuel Hollister. I love you too, Eleanor Hollister. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the house behind them, grandchildren laughed. In the forge, William's hammer rang out a steady heartbeat of iron and fire. And on the porch, two people who'd found each other against all odds sat hand in hand, watching the light fade, grateful for every moment they'd been given. Some love stories begin with a glance across a crowded room. Theirs began with a refusal, a stubborn widow, a man who wouldn't walk away. And in the end, that's exactly how it was supposed to be. Because the love that matters most isn't the love that comes easy. It's the love that survives. It's the love that fights. It's the love that once found never lets go. And Samuel and Ellie Hollister held on until the very end.